Salisbury Plain, England, home to one of the world's most mysterious sights, a circle of towering stones whispering of ancient societies and arcane rites, known as Stonehenge.
Archaeologists doing excavations around Stonehenge.
5,000 years ago, someone built a giant puzzle out of stone on the empty plains of southern England. Today we call it Stonehenge, a circle of massive rocks weighing up to 25 tons each.
Here's a look into the world of the Stonehenge.
This stone circle is possibly one of the most recognizable and important prehistoric monuments.
Shaped with remarkable precision and somehow transported across vast distances without wheels or metal tools. But here's the question that refuses to go away. How did a prehistoric society build something this advanced? Recently, researchers fed centuries of archaeological data into Grok, the powerful AI system developed by xAI.
And Grokopedia is instant knowledge about the people from one AI.
What the AI uncovered was startling. Hidden patterns in the stones, mathematical relationships, and astronomical alignments that suggest Stonehenge may be far more sophisticated than anyone ever imagined. Suddenly, the monument doesn't just look ancient. It looks like a mystery we are only beginning to decode. Stonehenge across centuries. Let me set the scene for you properly, because the sheer improbability of Stonehenge gets lost when you have only seen it in photographs. You are standing on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England. The land is flat and open in every direction. The wind never stops. There is nothing here that suggests a reason to build anything, let alone the most famous prehistoric monument on Earth. And yet, beginning around 3000 BCE, people started digging. First, a circular ditch and bank, roughly 110 meters across. Then, inside that circle, they dug 56 evenly spaced holes, now called the Aubrey Holes after the 17th century antiquarian John Aubrey, who first documented them. These holes are spaced with remarkable precision around a circle 86.6 meters in diameter, roughly 4.9 meters apart. They held something, possibly timber posts, possibly bluestones, almost certainly cremated human remains because excavations have found bone fragments in most of them. That first phase alone represents an enormous investment of coordinated labor for a society of early farmers. But it was what came next that defies explanation. Around 2500 BCE, the builders began erecting the massive sarsen stones that define Stonehenge today. These are not boulders someone found lying around. They are shaped. Their surfaces show thousands of hours of work, with stone mauls pecked and ground into smooth faces. The lintels on top are curved to follow the arc of the circle. They are joined to the uprights using mortise and tenon joints, a woodworking technique applied to 25-ton blocks of rock. The horizontal lintels are connected to each other with tongue and groove joints. This is carpentry logic executed in stone at a scale that boggles the modern engineering mind. In 2020, a research team led by David Nash published findings in Science Advances, confirming that most of the sarsen stones originated from West Woods near Marlborough.
We found it, a direct chemical match with one area about 15 miles to the north of here, a place called West Woods on the Marlborough Dam.
About 25 kilometers to the north. The bluestones came from the Preseli Hills in Wales. And then, in 2024, the bombshell. Curtin University researchers used mineral fingerprinting, analyzing over 500 zircon crystals to prove that the central altar stone came from the Orcadian Basin in northeast Scotland. A separate 2026 study from the same team found no geological evidence that glaciers ever reached the Stonehenge area, effectively ruling out the idea that ice carried the stones naturally. People moved them, deliberately, across distances that should have been impossible for their era. The question that haunts every archaeologist who studies this site is not how they did it. It is why they cared enough to do it at all. And there is another layer to this that rarely gets discussed. Stonehenge was not built in a single generation. It was constructed, modified, and reconfigured over a period of roughly 1,500 years, from about 3000 BCE to 1500 BCE. That means this was not one community's project. It was a multi-generational commitment. Parents taught children, who taught their children, who taught theirs, all maintaining a coherent architectural and astronomical vision across centuries without any form of writing that we know of. Whatever knowledge drove the construction of Stonehenge, it was transmitted orally, ritually, physically, embedded in practice and tradition with a fidelity that lasted longer than the Roman Empire. That alone tells you something profound about the minds behind these stones. These were not people stumbling through prehistory. These were people with a plan that stretched across time itself. Stonehenge meets AI. For most of its research history, Stonehenge has been studied the old-fashioned way, people with trowels, tape measures, and educated guesses. That started changing in 2012 when the Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project, led by the University of Birmingham and the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute, began scanning the surrounding area with magnetometry, ground-penetrating radar, and electromagnetic induction sensors. They surveyed 18 square kilometers of terrain and
this ground-penetrating radar technology is revealing evidence, undisputable proof.
produced the most detailed subsurface map of the Stonehenge landscape ever created. What they found hidden beneath the grass stunned the archaeological world. Hundreds of previously unknown features, buried pits, post holes, timber structures, processional routes, and entire monuments that had been invisible for millennia. But the real shift came when researchers started feeding this ocean of data into pattern recognition algorithms. See, the human brain is remarkable at many things, but it has a ceiling. When you are looking at thousands of geophysical data points scattered across hundreds of hectares, your eyes glaze over. You see what you expect to see. You miss what you do not. Machine learning does not have that problem. It does not get tired. It does not bring assumptions. It searches for mathematical relationships with the same cold patience, whether it is analyzing 10 data points or 10 million. And when researchers at the University of Bradford applied object-based image analysis to the electromagnetic survey data from the Stonehenge landscape, the algorithms started flagging features that human interpreters had overlooked or misidentified for years. Things that had been dismissed as natural sinkholes turned out to be massive human-made pits forming deliberate geometric patterns. In 2020, Vince Gaffney and his team announced the discovery of a vast circle of at least 20 enormous pits surrounding Durrington Walls, the giant henge complex just 2 miles northeast of Stonehenge. Each pit was roughly 10 meters across and 5 meters deep. And they were not random. They formed a near-perfect ring, 2 kilometers in diameter, centered on the henge. The data had been sitting in archives for years. Human eyes had looked at it and seen nothing special. The algorithms saw a monument. And this is where the mystery deepens. Because the discovery at Durrington was not an isolated case. It was the beginning of a pattern. Researchers began applying similar computational methods to Stonehenge itself, reanalyzing the laser scan data, the survey measurements, the astronomical alignments, everything that had been collected over decades. And the machines kept finding things that people had missed. Relationships between features, mathematical ratios embedded in the spacing of stones, geometric connections between Stonehenge and surrounding sites that only became visible when you zoomed out far enough and let an algorithm draw the lines. In 2024, a joint British-American team conducted what was described as the most comprehensive digital survey of Stonehenge ever attempted.
They did one final survey and made the most remarkable discovery of the entire study, 3 feet below the earth.
They scanned not just the standing stones, but fallen lintels, buried remnants, and the surrounding terrain using drones, laser scanners, LiDAR, and radar, creating a complete digital twin of the monument, accurate to fractions of a millimeter. When neural networks analyzed this data, they identified at least 5 distinct stoneworking techniques on the sarsen surfaces. The first was expected, pecking and grinding with stone mauls. But along the lintels and joinery, the algorithms detected shaping of astonishing precision, tolerances that seemed impossibly tight for people working without metal tools. The data does not lie, and it does not care about our assumptions about what Neolithic people could or could not do. Stonehenge, celestial calculator. Now we come to the Aubrey holes, and this is where I need you to pay close attention. Because what I am about to tell you has been debated in academic journals for 60 years, and it still has not been resolved. In 1963, astronomer Gerald Hawkins of Boston University published a paper in Nature arguing that Stonehenge was not just a temple or a burial ground, it was a computational device. Specifically, he proposed that the 56 Aubrey holes could function as an analog computer for tracking the movements of the sun, the moon, and the invisible orbital points called lunar nodes, the places where the moon's path crosses the sun's path in the sky. Those crossing points are where eclipses happen, and they do not stay put. They drift backward through the sky on a cycle that takes 18.61 years to complete. 3 of those cycles equals 55.83 years, almost exactly 56. Hawkins argued this was not a coincidence. Astronomer Fred Hoyle took Hawkins's work further and developed a practical method. Place markers in the Aubrey holes. Move a moon marker 2 holes per day, completing a circuit in 28 days. Move a sun marker 2 holes every 13 days, completing a circuit in 364 days. Move 2 node markers 3 holes per year in the opposite direction. When the sun and moon markers land in the same hole as a node marker, you have an eclipse warning. It is elegant, it works, and it means that 5,000 years ago, people on Salisbury Plain may have understood the mechanics of lunar orbital precession well enough to predict eclipses, knowledge that European astronomers would not formally document for another 3,000 years. The archaeological establishment initially recoiled. Richard Atkinson, the leading Stonehenge authority at the time, dismissed the builders as howling barbarians, a statement he later publicly regretted. When modern researchers fed Hawkins's alignment data and Hoyle's computational model into verification algorithms, the results were unsettling. The mathematical relationships are real. The 56-hole count does correspond to the 3-cycle eclipse prediction window. The solstice alignment to the heel stone is precise to Stonehenge's exact latitude of 51 degrees 11 minutes north. And here is a detail that should stop you cold. Stonehenge is situated at a geographically unique latitude where the lunar and solar sight lines cross at right angles.
Stonehenge is a solar calendar, a method of timekeeping.
That is not true at every latitude. It is a specific property of this location. Did the builders know that? Did they choose this spot on Salisbury Plain out of all the places in Britain they could have built? Because it was the one place where the geometry of sun and moon aligned most cleanly? The Greek historian Diodorus, writing in the 1st century BCE, described a magnificent temple on an island in the north where the moon appeared close to the earth every 19 years, a passage long associated with Stonehenge and the lunar nodal cycle. In 2022, another analysis proposed that the sarsen circle may encode a 365.25-day solar calendar, with the 30 stones of the outer circle and the month divisions correlating to a system that tracks the solar year. The 19 blue stones in the inner horseshoe match the Metonic cycle, the 19-year period after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same calendar date, a cycle that Greek astronomers formally documented millennia later. Whether the original builders intended all of these mathematical properties or whether we are finding patterns in noise remains an open and genuinely difficult question. But the sheer density of mathematical correspondences, astronomical alignments, eclipse prediction windows, solar calendars, and lunar cycles all converging at a single site built into its very architecture is harder to dismiss as coincidence with every new analysis. At some point, the accumulation of evidence stops looking like projection and starts looking like design. Stonehenge as an acoustic chamber. Now here is something most people never think about when they picture Stonehenge: sound. We think of the stones as visual objects, massive and silent, standing against the sky. But in 2020, Professor Trevor Cox and his team at the University of Salford's Acoustics Research Center did something no one had done before. They built a physical scale model of Stonehenge, 1/12 actual size, using 3D printed stones treated to replicate the acoustic properties of the real sarsen and bluestone. They placed it inside a semi-anechoic chamber and tested what the monument sounded like when it was complete, all 157 stones in place as it would have stood around 2200 BCE. What they found changed the conversation about Stonehenge entirely. The stone circle created a measurable reverberation effect. Sound generated inside the monument, a voice, a drum, a chant, was amplified and sustained. The reverberation time to 60 decibels was 0.6 seconds inside the circle, enough to noticeably enhance the human voice and make music resonate. But here is the crucial part. That amplification did not extend beyond the stones. Sound stayed inside. If you were standing within the circle, voices were clearer and richer. If you were standing just outside, the effect vanished. Stonehenge was, acoustically, a private chamber in an open field. Cox described it by saying the voice would have been enhanced by being in that space. Timothy Darville, an archaeologist at Bournemouth University who was not involved in the study, went further, saying these structural sounds must have been one of the fundamental experiences of Stonehenge. A separate 2013 study from the Royal College of Art found that certain bluestones produce loud, resonant, metallic sounds when struck, like stone gongs. Researchers were able to play the stones, coaxing out distinct tonal frequencies that suggest the bluestones may have been selected specifically for their musical properties. Those stones were hauled 140 miles from Wales. The nearest available rock was 25 miles away. Why go further unless the specific material mattered? And what if it mattered because of how it sounded? Think about that for a second. What if these Neolithic builders were not just architects and astronomers, but acoustic engineers, choosing their raw materials the way a modern luthier selects tone woods for a violin? What if the bluestones are not just construction material, but instruments? Rupert Till, a musicologist at the University of Huddersfield who has conducted his own acoustic research at the site, has noted that Stonehenge hums when the wind blows hard. The stones vibrate. They resonate with the landscape. Imagine standing inside that circle 5,000 years ago, surrounded by stones that sing in the wind and ring like bells when struck, while the reverberation wraps every spoken word in a halo of sustained sound. The firelight flickering against the inner faces of the sarsens. The drum beats bouncing between stone walls that keep the sound locked inside, intimate and immersive, while the outside world hears nothing. Whatever rituals happened inside Stonehenge, they were not silent. They were designed to sound extraordinary. They were designed to feel like stepping into another world, and the precision required to achieve that effect, the selection of specific resonant stones from a specific distant quarry, the spacing and curvature of the sarsens to contain and enhance sound, none of it looks accidental. It looks engineered. A landscape designed with purpose. From the ground, Stonehenge can look like a lonely circle of stones set in rolling fields. Photographs often frame it in isolation, a single monument frozen in time. But that impression is increasingly misleading. Recent research is revealing that Stonehenge was never a standalone site. It was the centerpiece of a vast, interconnected prehistoric system. a cultural, ceremonial, acoustic, and astronomical landscape that extends for miles and only becomes visible when you step back, or let algorithms step in. For centuries, archaeologists and enthusiasts focused primarily on the stones themselves, how they were erected, where they came from, and why they align with solstices. But beginning in the 2000s, a series of groundbreaking surveys transformed our view of the surrounding terrain. Using technologies like LiDAR, light detection and ranging, magnetometry, and ground-penetrating radar, the Hidden Landscapes Project revealed hundreds of features previously invisible beneath pasture land and plow soil. Suddenly, burial mounds, cursus monuments, long linear earthworks, timber circles, pit alignments, and processional avenues appeared across the plain, revealing a densely populated and highly intentional architectural environment. Rather than scattered relics, these features form patterns discernible only from above or through computational spatial analysis. It is now clear that the people who built Stonehenge were shaping not just a single monument, but an entire sacred district. One of the most dramatic discoveries underscoring this integrated landscape is the Durrington Walls Henge, less than 3 kilometers northeast of Stonehenge. Though known to antiquarians in the 19th century, modern survey techniques revealed it was not just another earthwork, but an enormous concentric enclosure, easily larger than Stonehenge itself. Radiocarbon dates and settlement evidence place it in the same broad era as the main stone circle, around 2600 BCE, and its context tells a story of life, feasting, and social gathering. At Durrington Walls, archaeologists have found remains of large timber houses, vast quantities of pottery and animal bone, and evidence of feasting on massive scales rarely seen in prehistoric Britain. In contrast, Stonehenge's mortuary evidence, including cremated human remains, suggests it was a place of the dead. This dichotomy inspired pioneering archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson to propose a ritual sequence embodied in the landscape itself. Durrington Walls represented the realm of the living, Stonehenge, the realm of ancestors. Connecting the two was the Avenue, a processional route of dual parallel banks and ditches that leads toward the River Avon. Water itself became symbolic. Crossing it was a metaphorical journey between worlds. That interpretation gained further weight in 2020, when a circle of enormous pits was discovered around the perimeter of Durrington Walls. These pits, at least 16 in number and nearly geometrically regular, form a ring of such scale and intention that researchers now see them as an integral part of the site's original design. Geochemical analysis shows that the chalk removed to make these pits shares a consistent signature from pit to pit, indicating they were dug at the same time and for a unified purpose. These enormous features, which may have held posts, timbers, or even served as ceremonial enclosures, demonstrate a level of planning and symbolic investment previously unimagined. Sedimentary ancient DNA recovered from layers of chalk and soil in and around these pits has added environmental depth to the picture. Traces of ancient plants and animals allow reconstruction of the prehistoric environment. Woodlands, grasslands, and riverscapes that would have surrounded the builders and participants in their rituals. It's a reminder that these places were lived in and experienced, not merely constructed and abandoned. The intelligence behind this landscape becomes even more apparent when acoustic properties are considered. Cutting-edge modeling suggests that the natural ridges and valleys around Stonehenge may have acted like channels for sound. Rhythmic drumming, chanting, and other sonic elements from processional gatherings could have been carried and even amplified across distances, creating an acoustic experience woven into the terrain itself. If confirmed, this means that the soundscape of Neolithic ceremonial life was shaped by topography as much as by human performance, an engineered auditory architecture that began well beyond the stones. What all this adds up to is a picture of Stonehenge not as an isolated relic, but as the apex of an intentional, multi-layered cultural landscape. More than 18 square kilometers of carefully arranged monuments, alignments, routes, and acoustic corridors paint a portrait of people deeply engaged with astronomy, geometry, the seasonal calendar, social identity, life and death, and their relationship to places older than themselves. In some cases, new features intersect and incorporate even older monuments, such as causewayed enclosures over 1,000 years older than Stonehenge, suggesting that prehistoric builders saw themselves in dialogue with an ancestral past. The implications of this expanded understanding extend beyond academic curiosity. As Professor Vince Gaffney, who led the Pit Circle discovery, has argued, recognizing the full coherence and value of this landscape makes its conservation imperative. Modern development, whether roadworks, housing, or agricultural change, threatens parts of this complex terrain in ways that could permanently erase information we are only now beginning to decode. We are not looking at a simple ruin built by simple people. We are beginning to read an ancient library, written in stone, earth, sound, and sky, and only now learning the alphabet. Stones are still there, standing through millennia, patient yet speaking to anyone who knows how to listen. Every scan, every acoustic model, every algorithm peels back another layer of their secret. But for every answer we uncover, a dozen more questions emerge. How did they move massive stones across hundreds of kilometers without wheels or roads? What knowledge did they embed in geometry, in sound, in the landscape itself? Knowledge we are only beginning to glimpse. And if we think we understand, are we merely scratching the surface of a wisdom that was meant to endure far beyond its builders' lifetimes? Stonehenge has waited 5,000 years for ears like ours. The question is not whether we can hear it, it's whether we are ready for what it has to tell us next.